Inside the Build, your destination for all things tech.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inside the Build, podcast sponsored by Experian Technologies and Helios Quantitative. My name is John Ripma, and this program explores the heart and emotion that are often hiding behind the building of software, complex business software. This is a weekly series that will delve into that aspect of building software, and that is where the person and the technology come together. And sometimes the person gets pretty frustrated with what's going on. Hopefully you'll be able to see how our guest today, Chris Shuba, was able to deal with those kinds of things and come out on the other side with a successful product. By the way, Chris is the CEO and founder of Helios Quantitative. He provides a software and a service to investment professionals who are trying to compete on a level playing field with the big boys of the world, the JP Morgans, the Wells Fargo, folks like Schwab's, folks like that. So Chris is going to share with us his experience from the very beginning when he thought of developing this product all the way through launch and supporting the product and the various ups and downs in between. So without any further comment, I'd like to welcome Chris Shuba to Inside the Build.
This will be fun.
Yeah. Well, it's good to see you. It's been a while since we've talked, so it is good to actually see you, and you're looking well. So
Likewise.
Let me get you started with a very high level question.
Mm-hmm.
So let's think about what sparked the idea for you to create tools, the tool application for your clients, these independent advisors, in the first place. What actually clicked in your mind that you decided this is something I really need to build?
Mm-hmm. So for our business, we consider ourselves at this stage to be a technology-enabled service. So it's really about this meshing of a digital experience that makes our relationship easy and scalable, but it's ultimately a service that we're providing. A bad example is Uber, right? So Uber is a technology that makes payment and ordering a ride really easy, but at the end of the day, someone has to show up and pick you up and take you somewhere. So there's that combination of technology and service, and we kind of see ourselves in that vein. In our beginning, we were all service. We had no technology. We more or less brute forced all the relationships that we had using available technology such as Excel and the underlying VBA that was associated with it, utilizing databases that we would create, getting into Python code, everything that we could control on our own to make things scalable on our back end, but really everything related to working with the advisor or other clients of ours was emails involving spreadsheets and so on and so forth that were limited in its scale and really professionalism. So we knew at some point we would grow to the point where we needed to have a real professional software interface that created that combination of increased capability that comes with that, the scale that we needed on our back end, and then of course there's a certain professionalism that comes with that digital interface. So we knew we'd get there. And there's really a combination in different amounts of those things, but primarily scale that drove us to building an application.
Yeah, it sounds like many small businesses, they started off with reliance on Excel spreadsheets and email, the basics that that were readily available, not expensive, but you could really get off the ground with them. So you grew beyond that. Another question to go along with that spark of inspiration that you had on your website, you have something very interesting, a statement that's very interesting. You say, disrupt or be disrupted. There is no middle ground.
Yep.
Now, fascinating thought. How does that concept fit into, your inspiration to build tools, and how do you think that plays out with your clients to disrupt or be disrupted? There is no middle ground. How does that fit?
Yeah, I mean, back when we started using that back in, 2015, 2016, this idea of disruption, our role as a quantitative research company and the related investment models and portfolio designs that we come up with, back then were very disruptive. And to this day, they're still fairly disruptive. But it's more of a mentality beyond the product that drives the way that we think about advancing our industry and advancing our advisors' ability to differentiate themselves in kind of a sea of sameness.
Mm, mm. Yeah,
Most financial advisors have exactly the same products, exactly the same software, exactly the same technologies. What makes them different is really their personalities in a lot of different sense, and how seriously they take client service and these little things around the edges that really aren't necessarily product driven, because when it comes to financial planning, there's really two or three softwares that everyone uses, right? When it comes to the array of financial products, pretty much everyone has access to all the same
yep,
stuff. So it really comes down to service levels and personality in many cases. And we've flipped that. We've disrupted that normal flow by now bringing much more comprehensive model and portfolio design features to the average financial advisor. And so we think of ourselves as not only giving our advisors more scale, more capability, more ability to differentiate and better serve their clients, but we also think of it to ourselves. We can't just get complacent with what we do. We have to always be advancing in things like how do we use AI responsibly,
right.
things of that nature, that big, slow moving companies that might try to provide similar services to an advisor that they just can't or won't do in the at the speed that we would. So, it's just a bunch of small business talk, that disruptive differentiation concept.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
Yeah, well, you mentioned that sea of sameness. And my guess is the listeners to this program, this podcast, small businesses and others who are uh, facing the sea of sameness as well. I mean,
mhm,
direct competitor is a direct competitor, and
right.
so how do you distinguish yourself from that? And I feel like I'm familiar with Helios Quantitative, and I know that, the products that you're putting in the hands of these the independent investment advisors that are out there is something that they highly value because it does in fact give them it makes them look like they're that they're part of the big boys, and it keeps them in. And I'm putting words into your mouth, but I'm
Sure.
familiar with it.
Mhm.
But it keeps them from feeling like they're a redheaded stepchild back there that they just can't keep up. But they're right in there. They can swing with the big guys.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting how much the industry has changed because, you know, the reluctance for the big companies to evolve, to differentiate themselves is incredibly low and remains incredibly low. So what's interesting about the advisory space now is the advisors that we support, in my humble opinion, far surpass the capabilities of the big companies now. And to the extent where I think the big companies are trying to catch up now, it's completely flipped. But really, it's about, differentiating yourself from other independent advisors, um, not so much, against the more captive wires, but it's a big competitive world out there, and we like where we're sitting in it. But to the earlier question about inspiration and why we built technology, you know, it, technology is the heartbeat of what makes all this go, because it's that bridge of capability, scale, um, you know, those major competitive points that all add up to differentiation.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I'm a little bit off. I've got another question I want to ask, but you made me think of something here, and that is the the particularly with I think independent advisors. I'm familiar with some of them, and I know that a lot of times they want to be creative. They want to
Mhm.
be uh, differentiate themselves from the big ponderous, the larger companies that are very limited and very under control. And their
Mhm.
clients, I'm thinking, the ones I've talked to, their clients, and I am a client of some, want that creativity, want that out of the box thinking,
Mhm.
that sort of opens up a whole world of intelligence that you don't necessarily, I didn't necessarily feel, speaking for myself, with the larger organizations that I felt like I was being processed, there was a template that got laid over me that I fit into and that's it,
Mhm.
and I didn't particularly like that. But so anyway, let me,
Yeah. I mean, I can expound on that, but I know we have a time limit.
yeah,
So you tell
yeah.
me where we want to go.
Why don't you expect, well, I would like for you to expound on it a minute. Yeah, I really would. Take a minute to do that if you can.
Well, the reason I say that is because, that's where tech comes into play. So one of the reasons we built out the application we did with Experian is about customization. And customization fits in two areas. The first is, does a model or a portfolio make decisions that are in line with the way that the advisor thinks about money management, in line with their philosophies, right? Some get very particular. Others don't care at all. They just want it to work, right? And that
Right,
enables
right.
us to serve that entire spectrum. But secondarily, what I've learned about portfolios is that most portfolios are fairly easy to create in the very beginning, but they're hard to manage over time. Either that's because they're only updated when an advisor happens to meet with a client, or the markets are moving quickly in different ways. How much do you make a trade? When do you go in? When do you go out? What is the magnitude or size or scale of it? Does that evolve? I think it's very, very complicated. And so in our way of using technology, we effectively automate all of that for the advisor so they can have their own unique philosophy, their own customization, and each client can be uniquely different in their design and behavior, but it's all
Yeah,
scalable. So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
that, you're really talking about that today's conversation, which is, why does tech matter to us? So,
Mm, yeah. Well, thanks. Let me shift gears now, and I'm going to move us really into the project, the
mhm,
tool that you built called Tools for
mhm.
the independent advisor. How did, and I know that you had the idea. Now, how did you narrow your search down? You could have bought off the shelf
Mhm.
stuff, I suppose, but you probably looked at some things. How did you go about the process really of narrowing things down to find a partner capable of building commercial grade software? There's lots out there, but finding somebody who's really got the chops to build that commercial grade software. How did you do that?
Um, it wasn't easy per se. I mean, at first, word of mouth, you ask around, who do you know that does this, that, or the other. And at the time, I didn't really know anything about it. I just knew that there were companies out there that could build software, and you tell them what you want and they make it, kind of a deal,
Yeah, yeah,
in its most basic form. But in terms of having any real practical knowledge of where to go, I didn't really have it other than word of mouth. So it became Google searches,
right,
looking
right.
up kind of what I want to build and trying to find, websites where I think may have done something in my industry. And from there it was, having the initial meetings via phone. They take what they think they know and come back to you with a presentation, so to speak. So I probably did it the absolute worst way and got lucky. Um, you know, um, but it's I think where a lot of folks, I think it's how a lot of it happens. When you're a small business, and unless you have like practical software work, you don't really know what to do and where to go. You can ask around,
Right.
but it's tough. It's not easy.
Right, right.
Mhm.
I totally get it. And I mean, it'd be great if you had a team of people that could sort through all the different options and
Mhm.
types of partners out there and whatnot. Small businesses don't really have that option. They've got to a certain extent, go on feel, and their gut will tell them whether this is, after they've had a conversation or two, whether this is a viable option for me at this
Mhm.
stage. But you selected an offshore partner,
Mhm.
right? And Experian Technologies. They're based in India. Now they have an offices here in the U.S., but primarily in India. Um, and as I said, Experian is the disclaimer is sponsoring this. But we're gonna examine Experian as an example, in the business case, without a lot of ads and promos or anything about Experian. But we'd like your experience or what given the fact that you did go with an offshore, you probably looked at other options as well, inshore. I know that's logical.
Mhm.
But given the language and physical distance, they're 10 hours, 12 hours different from Sacramento, California, where you are.
Mhm.
Um, how were you able to make that decision? And how were you able to communicate your vision early on that you felt like that they tied in with that they got you, they understood where you were going? How did you do that?
Now remember, we're talking years and years ago here, so I'm
Right.
gonna pull the things out of the memory strings here, but I never really had a bias one way or the other to onshore or offshore. Coming into the process, I knew that there was talented people everywhere, and I've never really had a problem with where the development took place. I was much more concerned with capability. Do they understand my industry, what I'm trying to do? Could they see around the corners that I just didn't know. I didn't know what I didn't know, and it was more about technical capability. Sorry, um, that that they could bring. So I know that some folks have that curiosity in terms of like, well, I want to do things onshore or offshore, and I just didn't have that at the moment. People that have that bias, that's fine, but I just
Hmm.
didn't, so to speak.
Yeah, right, right.
But at the same point in time, even if I did have that bias, when you look at a lot of even the US based companies, they're offshoring underneath the hood anyway. So there's very few options that I came across that were 100% US. Then it also comes down to cost because the reason beyond just capability that you would actually choose offshoring is that it's just a heck of a lot less expensive by hour. And you can make arguments around talent one way or the other. I've not found that there is a talent gap across the board. Obviously, when you work with any organization, there's going to be some folks in it that are stronger than others, and that's every company on the planet. But as a whole, I've not seen in all the different tech development type stuff we've done and all the companies that we partner with that have gone in all kinds of different directions. I've never once run across a massive talent gap just because of location.
Yeah.
So that is a prerequisite, you know, offshoring or onshoring really didn't matter to me. Now you talk about the time difference. If I had been asked to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, that might have been something, but that was never asked to me, right? We ran our normal business hours for the most part, and the offshore team, Experian accommodated in this case, which I think everyone does, right? So it
Yeah.
never really
Yeah.
kind of was an issue for me. Um, but then, once we had, kind of sent out our RFP, for lack of a better way of saying it, to a handful of companies, then you start to get the responses in. And that's where you start to see these companies pull apart from my perspective. On one end, you get some very loosey-goosey, kind of light on information, emails, or maybe a tiny little PowerPoint presentation. What made Experience stand out was it looked like the amount of effort they had put in to getting to know us up front and then regurgitating that back to us in a formal presentation. Um, that initially is what made them leap out to me, was their desire to really get it on day one, not just get a minimal amount of information to give me a quote effectively. It felt
Hmm.
like they were
Hmm.
investing their time in us a little bit, and I liked that. Um, and then combined with them being offshore, the price was in line with what I was expecting. Um, I'm not the guy that ever takes the lowest or the highest. I kind of always look for the middle ground, and that's where they were, because I do want quality. I do think you pay for what you get in a lot of cases, but there is such a thing as overpaying too. So
Hmm.
so yeah, I mean, I wish it was some kind of complex, massive decision-making process, but it really boiled down to they made me comfortable with what they could bring to the table. They invested more time than others into us in the beginning to get to know us. And, you know, given that, they were able to give us fair pricing that didn't have any surprises really lined up to it. Every project's going to have its ebb and flows, but you know, there's always the nightmares about them not taking the time to understand you and then, coming back
Right,
mid-process with a massive budget increase. Really didn't experience that.
right,
So
right,
hope
right.
that makes sense. I mean, that's a lot of babbling there, but it's
Well, no, I think it makes a lot of sense. Last question here, before we have to wrap up this podcast. But you mentioned as far as them experiencing getting to really know you and then managing that process of understanding what you want. Did working with companies that are half a world away, you need technology to just do that.
mhm,
While they're building technology, you need technology to do that.
mhm,
Did Experian, as far as I know this was several years ago, and you
mhm,
had people that were doing it, but
mhm.
did Experian bring the proper kinds of collaboration tools and things like that you needed to really just jump into this thing and get your ideas, share your ideas and their ideas, building the architecture and all of that? Did they bring all that to the table, or did you have to create that yourself, or do you know that?
Um, I'll answer the question in two ways. In the very beginning, where we were sharing our information and what we wanted to accomplish with them, they took it in whatever format we were going to give it. So if we did it in Excel, they took it,
Okay. Yeah.
and if there is any tip that I'll give anyone that's, in this position where you're trying to figure out who to call and so on and so forth, the more detailed you can be about what you really want, the better it is for you. So spend that time up front, whatever format you put it in, Excel, Word, PowerPoint, the more you can really give a clean explanation of what you're trying to accomplish through work streams, through like, I want to be able to do this and tell a story, right? That's what I mean by a work stream is,
Mm.
I log into the system and I do this. And I start at the beginning and I get my end result. And you'll probably have multiple work streams that a user of your system will go through. But having those levels of details on day one is going to make everything for you a lot smoother and faster. But yes, once we had begun the process of working with them, they brought their best practices to the table. They said, well, here are the systems and processes that we use that makes everything work well. Trust us, right? And we wanted that because we're a startup, at the time, and we didn't have any existing things. So that worked. That was exactly what we wanted from them was tell me the best practices. Tell me what you're already good at using. So we don't have to invent the wheel. Um, but I'm certain that, if you're an existing company and you're already used to building tech and you're looking for a different provider, that, I wouldn't shock me if Experian would accommodate whatever tech, or communication tools or whatever you're using now. So,
Right, right, right.
but yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully that makes sense. Yeah.
Well, good. Well, great. Well, kind of wraps up this first podcast. And thank you, Chris. Really
Mhm.
great start. I mean, really fascinating information too. And until we meet again on Inside the Build, I wish you continued success. And as you face the human and technical challenge that you ran into in the beginning, hopefully you've tamed those by this point in time. But you never really, the journey never really begins until you go live, and so you're live and probably fighting the good battle every day. So I really appreciate
Mhm.
your help, and look forward to our next conversation next week. Thanks a lot, Chris.
Mhm.
Thanks. Bye.